Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning back in. I wanted to remind you that we're hosting Steady Drinks with Steady Lads for subscribers in Singapore for Token 2049. The link is in the description below, and the event is on Tuesday, September 17th from 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. The three of us will be there, and we'd love to meet you there and chat more about our space.
Welcome to Steady Lads, everybody. Episode 60. This is the pre-Singapore episode. Justin and Taiki are about to fly out and meet me in the wonderful land of palm trees and...
Yeah. Jordi, you're going to scoop us from the airport, right?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to, use my car, which I don't have here. Come get you. We'll get into markets in a little bit, but excited to have you here. Of course, we're going to do a live episode on stage at Token on Thursday. So anyone who's around can come hang out. We will have Chao Wang. He will be our guest, as he has been a couple times already. And so we're looking forward to that. He's always really on the ball. But it has been an eventful week. We have had debates and inflation news. Everything has been quite volatile, but at the end of the week, at least it looks for now at the time of recording that we are in a pretty good spot. I think the vibes were really bad and things still bounced. So I don't know what it tells you guys, but for me, it says that there is some external support coming in, and it could be macro related.
Yeah, no, I had a question for you, Jordi. So before we talk about the debate, I think we can talk about the rate cuts. So obviously the Fed meeting will be next week. They're expected to cut rates by 25 or 50 basis points. Do you think that will have an impact to crypto, or do you think that's mostly been priced in? But just generally, do you think that will lead to more stablecoin inflows on chain because maybe the DeFi rates will be more competitive with TradFi rates?
It's not going to change anything for now. 25 bips is definitely priced in, and at this point, it's not going to affect anything. No one's going to change their behavior based on that. I think at the end of the year, if we get 4 rate cuts and we're at 1% lower, things might start to shift a little bit. For now, this is nothing exciting in terms of uncertainty being resolved. There's no uncertainty. I think at this point with CPI coming in a touch higher than expected because of housing, we are going to be at 25 bips and we'll start the cycle. The question is, when will they stop? I think we'll definitely get the next 4 meetings, a 25 bip cut, unless something crazy happens, and we'll take it from there. So I think the main thing is going to be the election, guys. And
do you think 25 is enough? Like, do you think by going slowly and cutting slowly, they could be doing too little too late? I mean, we're seeing that unemployment's slowly going up. Things are slowing down in the economy generally. The rate cuts are doing what they're supposed to do. Do you think 25 is too little?
Honestly, I would say it's fine. It's the right rate cut size and the right pace. I wouldn't mind if they make a accelerated mistake and heat up inflation again. I'm kind of prepared for the reheating of inflation. So if they want to do more aggressive cuts, I'm here for it. But realistically, right now the economy is not in a terrible shape. The Japan situation is stable for now, and I think this will be the right progress of rate cuts. But let's look at the debate as well. I don't know if you guys watched all of it. I did sit through it. I wasn't sure if I was happy about it at the end that I watched it. And I lost a few brain cells. Did you guys watch it?
I watched the whole thing live. Obviously, I mean, even right-wing people agree that Kamala won. I think that was pretty clear. I think she was pretty skillful. Whatever you think of her in sort of baiting Trump down paths that were, let's say, a distraction from the key issues for people that are voting. And Polymarket has priced that in as well. So Trump had a 6% or so lead, 6 to 7% lead going into the debate, and he lost that all during the debate. It was about tied neck and neck, 49-49, 50-50. And now you can see that Kamala has actually taken the lead. So I'm not going to, give myself a medal like Jordi did last week just yet. We have to sort of see how things unfold. But, if you guys remember, I said Trump has about a 45% chance of winning. Kamala has about a 55%. I said it's all coming down to PA. has now flipped back to somewhere in the middle. You can see here it's gray. It's not blue. It's not red. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if Kamala can maintain this momentum. Obviously, this is probably bearish for our tokens because Trump has certainly been more friendly towards crypto from a regulatory standpoint. But we'll have to wait and see. I do think this trend will continue, especially if they do another, which sounds like they will.
I mean, for everyone who missed last week, Justin Bram is Philadelphia GCR. So he is the Philadelphia... Pennsylvania. So just as a reminder, he thinks that Nate Silver has it wrong. He thinks he's got the right odds, as he said. Look, like the debate, I wouldn't say it was too bad. I think Trump was outnumbered. We have this bold Leonidas cartoon here to illustrate how, he got cooked, but he got cooked by the moderator.
It was a 3-on-1.
Yeah.
Look, it was totally biased. I don't know if the average person that's undecided is watching the debate and saying, well, it was a little unfair. They fact-checked Trump 4 times and Kamala obviously lied as well and they didn't fact-check her. I think the average person is just saying wow, she's like a very skilled prosecutor type and he's just going off the rails and he just seems angry. So we'll see. Trump had some good moments. She seemed very nervous at the start, but I think the consensus is that she definitely won and seemed more let's say presidential on average.
I have a question for you, both of you. So I think it's pretty much consensus that, Trump is better for our coins than Kamala. But in a way, don't you think that the election, once it happens, it'll remove uncertainty? Because no matter who gets elected, it's going to take time for anything to happen. And crypto, realistically, is not really a priority for either of these candidates, right? So do you think that the election could potentially just be a bullish event for crypto, or am I just a delusional bull?
I think it could be bullish either way. We did see that the debate went against Trump and we had a sell-off initially. We went from 58K down to back to the 57, 56. And then later in the day, just no one cared. It's back to buying and it's not the end of the world. I think also, the amount of impact of a debate is quite small. I think it was a 3%, 4% move, but all in all, it's not going to affect the outcome more than 1 out of 25 times, which is not a lot. I do think for the economy, it's even more of a nothing burger. So look at Kamala. She will print money as well. In terms of stocks, she might even be better for stocks than Trump, because Trump is going to start the whole, he loves the trade wars. He loves all this stuff. He's going to start that stuff. So for TradFi, I think Kamala might even be slightly better, assuming that she gives up all these insane ideas about unrealized gain taxes, which I don't even think that if she didn't, I don't think there's a way to even implement that.
Well, it's a pretty in-depth policy. If you read it, they have a very in-depth plan on how to actually make this happen. It's pretty wild.
Let them try.
Well, you're not American, so it doesn't affect you, but
I think regardless, there's no way to really implement this kind of stuff, right? This would be quite crazy. I do think for crypto, it is influential. It will matter. I think, Justin, you're probably agreeing that for our little corner of the world, like it or not, there will be a difference.
A huge difference.
Building.
Yeah. In the long term. I mean, I think that night of the election, if Trump wins, maybe Bitcoin goes up 5% and sort of trades into nothing over the next week. And if Kamala wins, maybe Bitcoin goes down 5%. So pretty insignificant. But over the course of 4 years, I mean, if we have Operation Choke Point 3.0 with Kamala, I do think that could basically just, continue to set the industry back even more, right? Just imagine a world imagine the world if we could have tokens that are securities and that represent, actual ownership over the company, that do have the plan of driving value to token holders. If that's all allowed, if there's a framework to do it, that's hugely beneficial and opens up the industry in a big way. There's some skepticism over if Trump will actually do that or if he's just sort of all talk. Obviously, we don't actually know, but I think objectively speaking, Trump has more favorable views to crypto. And in the short term, sure, it's not going to be a big deal, but 4 years of very pro crypto regulations versus 4 years of very anti, I think do make a big difference.
Yep. Let's bring up a few charts. I mean, it's been choppy as hell, but it has been holding up. I think the vibes probably bottomed out. Maybe not for Ethereum. I think still down on the day compared to Bitcoin being up. So
This is an Ethereum free episode, though, right? We agreed on it.
yeah.
It's still our therapy hour.
Therapy hour. I think we're breaching that 0.04 level, so we're kind of just there now. BNB having, I don't know if it's a CZ premonition or what's going on, but it's up 8% on the week, which is the best performing coin as well. With Ton coin, which Ton I think is just slowly recovering from the initial shock of Durov, and so that was maybe to be expected. A little bit of a bounce back there, but there's still a lot of CT infighting between the bulls and the bears. We have Doran Cole here. He has been the leader of the bear faction, I would say, and this dude just posts like every 30 minutes. He just posts something bearish. He can't stop.
Dude, let's look at his let's look at his pin tweet. 44,000 yearly open. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you check, he has been calling for much lower levels than anyone else. Look, there is always a chance that we get liquidations there, but the game, in my opinion, is very different. I don't think we can see 44K sustainably just because of the amount of like inflows and money printing and institutionalization. I would be surprised if we get that low. He's calling for yearly lows breaking, basically. I don't know. I don't see it.
Yeah, Jordi, on that note, I saw this tweet you had posted that if you are bearish coins and you're holding USD, you're actually long fiat, you're long dollars. Can you talk about what you meant by this tweet?
Yeah, so basically, if you're trying to short like this coal guy, and I'm telling him he's just going to get like a sack of coal for Christmas. If you're trying to short for prolonged periods of time, for the whole year, you're starting getting affected by the debasement of fiat currency. So, estimates vary from, 15, 20%. Who knows exactly what the debasement rate is? Depends on the exact policy. But you don't want to be just like structurally short. You will have a problem. And I learned this the hard way. So in 2020, maybe let's bring up S&P 500 during COVID years. So I was trading some, discretionary macro book, doing quite well on the fixed income side. And then when COVID hit, we can see here, 2020, S&P had just been running up nonstop without any dips for like the last years. And it was at 3,400, which was quite a high P ratio for the entire index. And you can see that there is this sudden collapse where it went from 3,400 to 2,200 because of COVID. Of course, the whole world stopping. So we see that this was that 36% drop, which is obviously that's huge, for equities, but things were overvalued. So, caught some of that, got out. And at that point, the Fed cut rates to zero, started just debasing to an insane degree that we've never seen before. And I made a mistake. So when it bounced back around 2,600, so from 2,000 to 2,600, there was a lot of talk. I don't know if people remember back then. There was a lot of talk about a double dip. There was an expectation that there, we would not just suddenly like V-shape recover. There would have to be a double dip. So I shorted 2,600. And I just stared in disbelief every day as things just kept ticking up, despite the whole world economy being stopped. And thankfully, I came to my senses. I said to myself, once we hit like 3,100, at that point, I was sure we would get like 4,000 because it means the game has changed. It's not based on fundamentals, economy, P ratios anymore. It just means that, the debasement has happened and we're just playing a different game. So thankfully, I lost that 500 points and then I avoided losing. What you can clearly see here is a run up to 4,700 without a single dip.
Jordi, I'm curious, what's your take? So, since basically the middle of, the stock market's up about 2x, 2.5x, depending on when you put the bottom at, the currencies, according to CPI, cumulative inflation since 2020 is, call it 25 to 35%, somewhere around there, 30%. The market's well outperformed inflation. Do you think we're just a much more productive economy? We've got AI coming online, all of these things, or you're laughing. I mean, is it really just actually the dollar's just been debased and devalued, and the inflation number, well, that's accurate for the price of goods that they're tracking, it's not actually accurate for the debasement?
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be laughing because ultimately the reality is there's theft happening, and we're on the right side of it. Probably everyone watching, owns some assets, and asset owners are the ones that are benefiting from this. The ones that are getting hurt, that we're stealing from, in essence, their purchasing power, are the lower classes that don't own any assets whatsoever. And when you see moves like this, no, we're not more productive. Like, it's not like AI.
2x more productive.
Do you really think like AI has changed much yet? Like maybe
no,
5 years,
not.
But like it hasn't. So,
but one thing I will say, like a caveat to that, is in this environment over the past 4 years, the US has gotten relatively much stronger than the rest of the world. And I mean, maybe that's a factor as well. So you've got 30% of this 2x is accounted for by inflation, maybe 20% by the gains of the US relative to elsewhere. There's just no alternative to where to put your money. And then like there's this other 50%, which is a huge amount from debasement. Do you think that could be true?
A little bit. The US dollar is the TradFi equivalent of Bitcoin, where like when there's uncertainty, a lot of the other alts kind of flow into Bitcoin. So we have that with the US dollar whenever there's uncertainty, and we have been living in uncertain times. I think, look, the one positive thing I will say about the economy that is sustainable, and this is what I've been saying for years, is the one hope. Energy is cheaper right now. For whatever reason, oil is in the 60s. I think we can bring up an oil chart maybe. If you want to bring up CL or Brent. This is something that does create a bit of a sustainable tailwind. And it's good to see, I think. Okay, so crude is $74. Obviously, it's a multi-year low here, so this is quite a positive situation for everybody who is not, Qatar or a heavy exporter.
I've heard people say this can be a signal, though, that the economy's slowing down. People are just buying less, and that's why the price is going down. Is there merit to that? People are driving less, traveling less, building less things, et cetera, or?
I think a little bit, but that's a second order effect. Do you want to bring up copper? Do you have copper? Yeah, so we copper is a bit more of an industrial metal. There are still quite a lot of people buying copper here. We're not that far from the highs. So I do think that activity is still ongoing in the real economy. The last thing we should look at is gold, and this one is always really interesting to look at. Obviously, it does go to show that there are buyers. I think the central banks are hedging their dollars with gold, and a lot of central banks are preferring gold to dollars now. This kind of thing it looks like a banana zone, right? Like you can start to get reflexive on things like gold, and I expect that Bitcoin will be continuing to be a macro asset in the same vein. Even if it's just like some guys like Drunken Miller and Paul Tudor that are putting on the spread, I do expect that we'll carry that momentum.
And Jordi, I wanted to ask you, so people do talk about gold as like this hedge for currency debasement, but actually, like, we just looked at the numbers. The S&P is about 2x or more actually up from the COVID lows. And you can see here that gold's only 60% above the COVID lows. So do you really want to hold gold as your store of value, or maybe even Bitcoin to some extent, or do you want to hold the S&P 500?
I think both are good. Gold and Bitcoin are for more extreme situations rather than these like slow grinds. They're for situations where people are actually worried that the way that the world operates might change, and there will be a need for a different unit of measurement. At that point, that can get very reflexive. Stocks can never get reflexive. There will never be like this mania of like, oh, I need to get some because I don't have some. Like, no one will ever care that they don't have a little bit of, Apple stock. It's not the end of the world. While if you are offsides when the world is starting to, let's just take gold because that's the one that's closer. If that $17 trillion asset starts to become really central to how economies are operating, and you don't have any exposure, then that can create a banana effect.
Yeah, and speaking of reflexivity, and I guess going back to crypto, obviously the vibes are down bad. Vitalik is tweeting more often than ever. But as we approach Q4, I feel like it kind of reminds me of Q4 2020 when Bitcoin was going up, alts were just getting wrecked. People were calling for, altcoins will never pump again. Do you think we're kind of repeating the same cycle in terms of human psychology, where now people just think that everything is vaporware, it's only Bitcoin, even ETH is a shitcoin? Do you think, things can happen, right? Where if certain alts start to go up, people are like, oh my God, like we have to buy. And then that can also cause some reflexive cycle.
I don't think there's anything like 2020, even Q4. Yeah, so right after DeFi summer, I think there was a little bit of a lull. And then, of course, like 21, I was a little bit worried because I saw that every single coin was outperforming Bitcoin. Even like complete junk was like outperforming by 5x. So I think that was nothing like what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is that basically Bitcoin has a product market fit. It's a macro asset. We're living in a very like volatile macro period. So it has a point. I have been thinking about this a lot. I brought this up last week. We have a big problem with alts. I've been reflecting more. I think the problem actually is, and no one has touched on this, there is a misallocation of resources happening. And a lot of it's driven that we don't have a consensus as to, where should capital go? Where should resources go? What should the builders be building? Where should the money be flowing? We're lacking a clear, let's call it like an academic framework of like, what's valuable? What's a market cap? What's an FPV? How should these things be treated? How do we look at like revenues? What's the P ratios we should be looking at? Nobody has any clue whatsoever. There's a few people with like nibbles of pieces of things, but as a community, as like an investor group, and I'm talking about like the entire investor group that buys crypto and is willing to invest in coins, there is very little consensus or understanding of how we should value these things. And I think that's what's sorely lacking. And the good thing about stocks is that you have simple, nice products like S&P 500. It allows every like random middle income person to just get a reasonable allocation in a capitally non-destructive way, where they're just buying a tiny bit of the biggest 500 companies and getting exposure. You cannot do that in crypto. If you try to do that with like the top 100 coins, you'll have your ETHs and then you'll also have your not as good coins. I don't want to shit talk any coins right now. I don't want to go to war right now. But you guys get my point.
It's obvious though, right? Like it is interesting. Like the top 100 tokens, to your point, if you just were to scroll through CoinGecko, I don't know if it's 75%, 80%, 60%, but like probably the majority are what we would consider, some are scams, just outright scams. Some are money grabs. Some have no utility and no usage and are just valued there for like mimetic purposes. It is true. There's no like reliable, way to hold a basket of this asset. And there's no clear valuation framework, to your point. I mean, I remember, if you guys remember the DeFi Pulse Index, I remember when this came out, it was an aggregator of the top DeFi tokens. And it's interesting because these are still the top projects in DeFi that the DeFi Pulse Index holds. It holds things like Uni, Aave, Compound, et cetera, like the top quote unquote blue chip DeFi projects. And obviously there's a few select winners, but generally this thing is down only, even though these are still like the best products we have in this space. So I totally agree. There is a weird thing that happens in our space where the most valuable projects aren't valued as the most valuable projects. And Jordi, I think this goes in line with your thesis from last week that we've talked about before of like, you've got your product and that can have your product market fit. And then you have your token and that can have token market fit. And the two are completely separate. You can have a great product and a bad token, or you can have no product and a great token. And I think that's part of the problem too, to your point.
Yeah. So you're saying that I think the industry needs to self-correct, right? And capital needs to allocate to the good quality coins, and then things kind of have to make sense, because right now things don't make sense.
But to be clear, it's not in my view, this isn't the industry's fault. This is a fault of lack of proper regulation. If we had the ability to drive value to tokens in a clear and legal way, and the US was not clamping down on going after tokens like Uni, which are quite decentralized and still doesn't direct value to holders, if they were actually supporting these efforts and saying, you know what, Uniswap can be an equity, the token can be an equity, and it can be a security, and you can buy it and hope you're investing in something that will deliver you value. I think the problem is regulation and lack thereof, as opposed to like founders and investors not knowing what to buy and sell.
I've heard that take. I think there's elements of truth to it, and yes, like if you can just comfortably start making a value accruing token, you can start designing better things. Even if we had that, we would still be lost in the fog of war.
On the piece of regulation, though, Jordi, I do think a lot of this really more comes down to regulation than we think. And the last example I'll give is, what if when you bought the Uni token, you weren't buying control over some fee switch, you were actually buying a share in what the Uniswap, this multi-100 person team, does in New York and what they're building next, and you're buying equity in the Uniswap wallet in iOS. You're buying equity in their front end fee. You're buying equity in everything that they're working on in the future. I think, to me, that investment thesis is much more clear, and the Uniswap token would be much more valuable. And as a result of that, the best companies that you could invest in would perform better, and there would be like a true way to value these projects.
Can I also step in there? So I hear you guys, right? There's not enough regulation. If the Democrats get elected president, then there can be no fee switch. But that's actually incorrect, right? Like Maker did a buyback last year. Aave introduced a fee switch, or about to introduce a fee switch. And then even earlier this year, Uniswap Foundation, they tried to turn on a fee switch. Ultimately, this did get shut down by Andreessen Horowitz. But at the time, Uniswap pumped like 2x whenever this proposal got posted. And that told me that the market will clearly bid Uni once there's some path towards value growth. And, going back to what Jordi said, this would make sense, right? Like if there's value growth for Uni, like this thing is going to send. But the final boss is the SEC and A16Z.
So I agree with you. I think that's all true. But I think one big thing you're missing is there's actually like a fight between, and it's not a real fight, but there's a fight between Uni token holders and Uni equity holders. The two actually have misaligned incentives. The more Uni token can take a fee and the more on-chain fees can be accrued, the less the Uniswap Foundation or the Uniswap company, the labs company, can turn on the fee switch on the front end. We were actually just looking at this. The fee on Uniswap front end is like 15 to 25 basis points, which is quite large, right? And the second that Uniswap fee goes on at the protocol level, you would think the Uniswap labs fee goes down. So there's this weird problem where labs equity holders and token holders actually have the opposite incentives here. The labs equity holders want as little value to the token holders and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. That's definitely a counter argument. But last month, Andreessen Horowitz, who is one of the biggest VCs into Uniswap, literally put out this blog article on how to drive cash flows for app tokens in a compliant way. And the way they did it is, or the three ways, is to allow staking for certain jurisdictions. So maybe if there's staking for, or whatever fees that gets generated in, like, let's say like the Asian front end, you can stake your Uni with the Asian front end, and that would be very compliant. That doesn't sound practical, but that's one way they talked about applying a token or applying a fee switch. And in terms of regulation, I do think that there is things happening behind the scenes that will allow for a fee switch. So for example, Miles Jennings here at the bottom, they say that that's why A16Z, they suggest that they should consider the DUNA standard. And I looked into this, and this was also a post by A16Z, but this came into effect July 1st of 2024. And if you just go through the post here, DUNAs are a nonprofit legal entity, but through the DUNA legal entity, you can actually pay people for voting, and this can be in the form of a fee switch. And they also say that using this entity form, you can actually argue against the Howey test, and these tokens wouldn't be a security. And A16Z plans to basically help their portfolio companies in the US adopt the DUNA standard. And I also listened to a podcast where A16Z guys like working on this for Uniswap. So don't you think that there is a path for a fee switch? Because they also talked about creating an app chain, and don't you think this would also align incentives where you can stake Uni for an app chain or an L2, and then the Uniswap front end can charge the front end fee? But Uni also becomes like a staking token, and then you can capture the transaction fee, MEV, etc. I feel like that's one way that they can do this. And coming from A16Z, I do think that we should be watching this, because A16Z is like final boss when it comes to turning on the fee switch, and they're literally telling us that there's two ways to do it. You can block certain jurisdictions or create an app chain. Don't you think that people are ignoring this, or am I just kind of delusional here?
I mean, I think you're right, and those things will and can drive value, but I think the problem is all of these solutions are a form of regulatory arbitrage, or basically like trying to skirt the regulations and go through an inefficient system like it. And I think that you can add value even though we're sort of like handcuffed by the regulations. Like we've seen that happen before, but I still think the best solution is proper regulations to where we don't have to play these silly games, right? And it can be a token that actually is considered a security under the Howey test, and that's actually a good thing, as it should be. You should be buying the Uni token to bet on the Uni team delivering value to the Uni token. That's like exactly how it should work in my mind.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, there might be a few tokens that could be quite improved, but they are far and few between. And there are teams outside the US that don't anyways care about this stuff. There's anonymous teams building in Asia that are very happy to give their tokens all the utility that they can. Doesn't mean that there's enough sustainable cash flow there. So as we talk about, like when there's a lack of understanding or certainty and there's this fog of war, people get very antsy, the vibes are deteriorating, and it looks like Vitalik is feeling the pressure. He has come out of the woodwork. We see here number of tweets per month started at 13, 2023, and first half of the year was 44 per month. He is on fire, 158 for August. That is insane. Let's look at some of the amazing things he's been responding to, because I see him everywhere. Every time I open this app, cannot believe the stuff that's going on. We have Kun here saying this is the real insight of Vitalik coming out. He never used to comment about this random posts, and that's true. Scroll up, he's telling people like, I don't even know or care who you are, and he's responding to them saying somebody called him a dick, and he's like, no, this is a dick. And it's a
duck. Got
it. Yeah.
Which makes no sense.
It's a star instead of the I or U. He seems to be trying. He's posting all his bulls, AI bulls, and all this stuff.
And then he had this other one where I think we had talked about Vitalik, or not Vitalik sales, but the EF sales not being telegraphed, and you could see someone is like disinterested in Vitalik saying like, I'm only going to talk about L2s that are stage 1+ that are like somewhat decentralized, and then Bizanacci said, fair, just stop selling ETH. And Vitalik's actually here like defending his sale. The sale from yesterday by a biodefense group, I think that is his COVID stuff, was triggered by an automatic cow swap TWAP order that was set way back in August 29th. That was the last one. And I do think it's a little absurd here that Vitalik's like defending his ETH sales like directly on Twitter. It's kind of funny how much things have changed in the last month, though.
And if you scroll down, there's a comment that's like, say that you dislike Kim Jong-un right now. I guess it's like a way to prove that he's not. I mean, I don't even know like why this is even a question. And he's like, oh, yes, okay, we're all good then.
He's responding to everything, right? Like, yeah. I think that he's not getting the vibes. He's not understanding the community sentiment. He's trying, in his own way to try to respond. But this tweet you just read out, Justin, for me is so tone deaf. It's hard to believe. Someone's saying like, please stop dumping on us. And he's saying, well, I'm funding a bio defense fund and they need to TWAP my cow swap order.
And it's all like COVID stuff, by the way, that he had like committed to and was obsessed about in 2020 and 2021. It's like, it's just not that compelling.
And then if like last little Vitalik like nudge here, but if you look at it, the tweet that he posted above, he did say that from next year, he's no longer going to mention any L2 in any blog post or talk if it is not a stage 1+ L2.
Nice.
He's like threatening to like not mention you on his talk. So this brings us to our bigger topic for today, which is, again, we have this decentralized tech. As a human species, no one's going to understand everything. We have people that are very good at left side of the brain, right side of the brain, social versus technical. Vitalik is clearly like, incredible technical cryptography person, and he's built something amazing. Are we going to kind of have a leader that we're following, and it's like a country, and we're just like listening to what he thinks a layer 2 should be based on the stages that he set? Or are we just going to take this as decentralized tech and then people will just decide for themselves?
I mean, that discussion is very important and all well and good, but like to your point, it is just so out of touch with like what the community cares about right now and how value is being delivered to the community right now.
In this time of crisis where ETH BTC is hitting multi-year lows, Vitalik is posting that he takes this seriously. He will not mention in blog posts or talks if you're a stage 1 L2. He'll pretend you don't exist, and he's very serious. And it just reminded me of this boomer Al Gore on South Park, where he's talking about Man Bear Pig, and he's talking about Man Bear Pig, and he's super serial. We have the clip here.
Man Bear Pig isn't real. Well, I'm here to tell you now, Man Bear Pig is very real, and he most certainly exists. I'm serial. Man Bear Pig doesn't care who you are or what you've done. Man Bear Pig simply wants to get you. I'm super serial.
So, this is the vibe I'm getting.
But I think Vitalik is starting to get it, right? I mean, you can see it from the number of tweets. And I actually got invited to hang out with Vitalik and some DeFi founders. I don't even know how I got invited to this, but maybe, the ETH people are trying to... They want like a left curve / mid curve like me to figure out
community outreach.
Community outreach, like Taiki, like how do we talk to mid curves like you? maybe like that's my role. So I'll try to help.
Well, make sure to invite Vitalik on Steady Lads.
I'll plug it in.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the DeFi champion, Taiki. Like all the other YouTubers are shilling, random stuff, and you're still going hard on Aave. Yeah.
Wait, but Taiki, do you have like some topics you want to bring up? Like, what are you going to say to Vitalik?
I don't know what the agenda is, so it's hard for me to say. But it's going to be just me, like Stani. I think Kane's going to be there. So I think it's just going to be like maybe a discussion on where DeFi is, where ETH is, what people care about. Because if you think, like maybe last month Vitalik had that tweet storm around, like he wants other stuff, then like other things other than DeFi to be built, right? So maybe, Vitalik wants to know, okay, like what does the community actually think? And maybe he can start bull posting DeFi at some point. I don't know.
It's not just about bull posting though, to be clear, right? Taiki, it's like actually about like supporting these teams, funding research from the EF level and DeFi. Like I actually think the bull posting is like the least exciting piece of it. I couldn't care less if Vitalik is like tweeting, at the level that Anatoly from Solana is. Like it's actually like the actions are more important in my opinion.
I mean, if Vitalik and EF at this point just got teleported to Mars and we're setting up like some new society and we lost them here, I think we would still be in a good, maybe like in a better spot for Ethereum, because at that point it would have this Bitcoin vibe, where it's a leaderless community that can just like function without the politics maybe. But all in all, I think this is a constructive period where the discovery of the next direction to go is going to be found. We're seeing Kyle Samani on Bankless and everyone hearing that and having opinions. We had this interesting tweet from Ryan Watkins. He has a few thoughts. He thinks we still don't have enough block space. I don't know about that. He thinks 1000x. He says it's not fungible. Like L1 block space is not fungible. I think everybody understands and agrees that we're still not in that fungible point. And this one I do agree with. Part 3, he says value capture will increasingly be monetary driven. He thinks that applications will start capturing more MEV. This is quite interesting. This money thesis that chains are only as valuable as their MEV, and that's the way to measure them. I think this is presenting more of the future that I expect, which is that applications will be able to capture MEV. And I think what this starts to create as a question is, how do you value the layer 1 token? We've talked about this many times for Solana, for Ethereum. Ryan's second tweet here says that he thinks the only way any of this is sustainable is if the layer 1 tokens are money. So not just Bitcoin or ETH, but basically like any layer 1, the base token needs to be money in order for sustainability to exist.
I think the point 3 by Ryan is assuming that maybe there's going to be more app chains, right? Where maybe Uni becomes a chain, Aave has its own chain, it captures the MEV, but then as a result, ETH captures less MEV, and then perhaps the apps become more valuable relative to ETH. Do you think that's possible as well?
Well, he's taking it even a step further. He's saying even the apps won't be able to keep it. They'll have to give it back to the users, because even apps are fungible. So like ultimately, MEV will not really exist. It will go back to the users to quite a large extent, as will gas. So like basically, the users will get a very good experience. And all that matters is going to be base money. And of course, we've seen Ethereum people say that L2s are not a bad thing because they're increasing the meme of ETH as money. So it's an interesting thesis. So I'm sure we'll revisit the topic of resource misallocation in crypto in future episodes as we try to chew through this. But let's go to pasta of the week, guys. I got a couple good ones. Maybe Justin, you want to kick off?
Yeah, I like my pasta. My pasta is community driven. So, we talked about Nate Silver being a little off here, the Polymarket model being off, and the Justin Brand model, the Pennsylvania model, being the real canonical model you should be following. And I think people are starting to sort of wake up to that, which, to be expected. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much. But we're actually seeing a lot of people on Twitter now, like, going after Nate Silver and saying, look, Nate, your model's off. Like, you need to follow the Justin Brown Steady Lads official model. And so shout out to the gopher here. Nate Silver posted on September 8th, big piece about the campaign, the mistakes of 2019, and what could cost Harris the election this year. And the gopher says, you don't address Justin C. Bram's disagreement with your model or include the data from his model in yours. Till you do, I can't take you seriously. I'll stick with 0x Steady Lads. And you can see even Jordi is singing the gopher's praise. So I appreciate you, gopher. And, keep tweeting at Nate Silver. I'm sure he'll get it someday. I'm sure he'll update his model. And, I just want this election to be, properly calculated and weighted by the market. So Polymarket's getting there. It's time for Nate Silver and his group to sort of come along.
I just find it funny that he misspelled your Twitter profile. Just C Bram. Sorry.
Well, look, the sentiment is right? Like the sentiment is correct. Steady Lads was properly tagged, and I think this is correct.
Yeah, and the one like shows that it's a tsunami of people that are saying about your model. So it's true.
Was that your like, Jordi?
I think it was my like. I think it's in you now. So
well, Steady Lads fans, show your support here to the Steady Lads official model for the election.
I'm not a part of his model. It's the Justin Brand model.
It's just Taiki and I. You're right.
Don't involve me in this.
All right. So, Taiki, how about you? What do you got?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Jordi, I've been the DeFi GCR, the mid-curve GCR, whatever you want to call it. I've had so much PTSD holding DeFi coins in 2022, 2023. It's been horrible. But I'm ready to just forget all that PTSD, and I'm ready to dive back in. So, buying DeFi 1.0 again is kind of like this girl who lost her memory, falls in love with the same boyfriend. Talk about a story of true love. Me and DeFi, true love, baby.
It's 50 first dates.
Yes, I'll never leave. I will continue to buy DeFi coins until I run out of money.
This is very good. Very fitting. So I have a tweet pasta, and also we have a little Puff update. So I'll give that first. So we have two cool things going on. One, we have a Uniswap mainnet pool now. So Puff is not only on Mantle now. I think we're going to see the effect of having a token on multiple chains. It was wrapped using Layer Zero's OFT, and there is a meth puff pool on mainnet now. So,
all right, but Jordi, you got to be honest with our listeners here. I mean, our friend Jared from Subway made an appearance, right, and took $1,000 from you. Is that right?
Well, we were checking the on-chain transactions after the deployment on the Uniswap pool, and Jared from Subway, man, you can't get away from him in the dark forest. He just appears out of nowhere. You just try to initiate the pool and deploy capital. He made half an ETH by arbing the pool against itself. So it's not safe out there, guys. It's not safe from Jared.
Yeah, so we were actually watching this happen live, and I saw Jared from Subway's ENS here. And it looks like he bought 24 ETH worth of Puff, and then, a second later sold it for 25.5 ETH, which is so interesting. I mean, it was just crazy to watch this live and see Jared from Subway. He was the first transaction on the pool too. So, I mean, this bot just really knows what it's doing.
It is dangerous out there, guys.
Stay safe.
Applications will have to protect us. Stay Sifu. So we do have a little clip from the new episode of Puff in the Dark Forest, as he and us are learning about the dangers in the dark forest. Maybe let's play a little clip of it.
What's up at all? You want in on this, bro?
No, don't do that. You're killing them.
Look at this shit. It's a cake. I'm not doing it, bro. Use the Felix.
Those meth crystals, huh?
That's how we do it in Acapulco, bro.
Did you seriously just own that crystal?
This is high production quality, Jordi. I mean, this is like a Pixar movie.
We talked about this. Like, you got to build a brand, and you need the highest quality materials to make your Prada bags. So this is what's going on. People can check it out on the Puff Twitter if they want to see the full video. My pasta of the week, just to wrap up, if we can bring it up here. People are adding more and more complication. There's more and more versions of staking, restaking, and vaults. So yield farming, who is following all this religiously, he has a may I interest you in EtherFi 7C's USD USDE USD0 vault in mitosis, restaked symbiotic, re-restaked via receipt token to Karak YT 7-month maturity.
This is probably real too, right? I mean,
it's real. Yeah.
Real.
Wait,
it's real?
He's a friend. He's a friend. Yeah. He knows everything.
What do you mean? Like, this is actually like a product? Is it a real product?
I think so.
The fact that
I'm pretty sure it is.
Just shows the absurdity of like what's going on.
I know and probably like with all this additional smart contract risk, you'll probably get like a 10% APY for dollars. Like
I mean, the reality is like you start creating more and more new tokens, and if they're worth something above zero, then you just stack them on top of each other until you get some 10% yield, and here you go. Here it is. So the good thing is we do have something like Pendle, which will at the end of the day simplify the entire stack into just like a single number in the PT, so you can at least get a simple experience if you want as well. All right, guys. Well, vote for your favorite pasta of the week on our Twitter. We'll have the poll out soon, and hopefully see a lot of you in Singapore. I think the live event and the drinks will be a good opportunity to catch some of you in person. So till then, take care.